Thank you all so much for being here. It's so nice to see such a packed room. And I know it's a super busy week at South by Southwest, so we appreciate you taking the time to be here. So thank you. My name is Amelia. I'm a reporter with Digital Frontier, and I'm joined by two wonderful guests today. To say that they're quite busy people would be a bit of an understatement. Chris is the CEO and co-founder of Granola. He co-founded it alongside Sam Stevenson. They recently raised, let me get the number right because I was about to say 43 million at a $250 million valuation. They also went live with an app and today did a launch of some Windows data, which is very exciting for everyone on Windows. And for those of you who don't know, Granola is an AI-powered note-taking app. If you've never experienced it before, don't worry, because Alice is diligently taking our Granola notes in the corner so that after the session, you will get the Granola notes of everything that we chatted about today. Zoe is a partner at Frontline Ventures, and she specifically is involved in the seed side of things. She also spent 5 years at Octopus Ventures before that. She also got off a plane mere few hours ago. So huge thank you to both Chris and Zoe for joining us today on a very busy time for both of them. Firstly, Chris, I want to ask you about coming to found Granola, because you founded it in a year where you took off time with the specific goal of finding something to found, but it wasn't your first company. You first founded Socratic, which was an AI-powered tutor for high school and secondary students, for those who are not the Americans, secondary school students. It was acquired by Google in 2018. You then were at Google for a little bit. Then you took off a year to figure out what to do next, which is when you met Sam, I think, and decided to found Granola. Tell us a bit about that and that year and at what point you figured out Granola.
Sure. Hi everyone. Google bought my last startup, and then I really didn't want to work for a big company, but the deal with my wife was that if I stayed there long enough and we saved up enough money, then I could take my time figuring out what my next startup would be. So I ended up spending 4 years at Google, and then quitting like the day my initial vesting ended. Socratic had been based in New York, and when Socratic was acquired, we moved to California. In the interim, we moved to London, so I didn't know anybody here, and I didn't know anything about the ecosystem. So that year was really a lot of me trying to meet people here, and also trying to figure out what idea I wanted to work on. And I think I got really lucky timing-wise, because I kind of missed the Web3 kind of hype. And then when I came out, AI hadn't really picked up yet, but no one was talking about it. It was kind of weird. I had started playing with GPT-3 was out at the time. And this was maybe 8 months before ChatGPT launched. And I remember playing with it and just being like, this is different. Like, this is special. Like, why is no one talking about this? And then it just started experimenting and going from there.
Cool, thank you. And Zoe, I know that you are a self-professed fan of Granola. I'm sure you're not the only one in the room. But Granola it's taken like the whole startup tech scene by storm, I would say, but particularly investors. What, for you, is the reason that you love Granola so much? Why is it that you've gone for that versus Fireflies, Otter, any number of the other note-taking apps that are out there?
Of course, very happy to answer this one, very easy. So I guess I would say, as a person who is in meetings for a lot of my day, I've used all of the other ones, by the way, absolutely. First thing that very much appealed to me was that only Mac users, because you're not joking. No, it was it was very unobtrusive. So whilst I do have to start by being like, I'm recording or I'm going to take some notes, that all right with you, versus another square appearing, etc., I found that amazing. Then, as the product has kind of progressed and more of our team use it, and I'm able to create my own templates. So there's basically 3 or 4 types of conversation I have most of the time. I get pitches from founders. I am pitching to my own investors. I'm meeting other kind of VC co-investors, or I'm doing due diligence. Some of those are on founders, so I'm doing very specific reference calls, and some of those will be on like ICP, like potential customers who might use a product. And so I kind of have 4 or 5 templates within which I can have all of my notes. I often, because we have such a huge volume of information, will remember things but not necessarily people. So I'll be like, someone spoke about a dog that did this thing, and I can search that, and it will be like, you're probably talking about these conversations, and I can search across other people's conversations, which I also very like, because I like having this compendium of group knowledge, because we are all doing things all the time, meeting new and interesting people. I will stop talking at some point about why I really like it. But basically, it has been that. It's been just ease of use. Obviously, as well, sorry, the transcription is very high quality. It does actually record what was said, and I like being able to ask it. So I was asking it, I had a reference call recently, and I was like, what was he skeptical about? He was skeptical about something. I just kind of can't remember what the thing was that he was skeptical about. And it came back, and I was like, that's exactly it. And so I like that I can sort of talk to it now and ask it to kind of talk about my notes. The sad thing is I'm probably locked in forever, because I'm going to have to like use all these notes. But no, we really do love it, and I'm delighted to be here to be able to tell you that we really love it. And it has been probably the biggest uptake of things, and we're using things all the time, we churn off things all the time, but yeah, it's been really excellent. So thank you for bringing it to our lives.
I didn't realize I was a user when I signed up. So this is great.
Yeah, we need to say that Zoe wasn't sponsored by Chris to say all those nice things. I guess, Chris, then obviously it's very useful to have investors be massive fans of your product for a number of reasons. Was that a conscious decision to build for investors first, or did it just sort of fall into being that it was really set up well for them?
Yeah, so we always wanted to build a horizontal tool. We thought the idea of people who have meetings and there's information in those meetings that you want to refer back to, and AI can be super helpful. We're like, oh, that's going to be useful to lots of folks, and we didn't want to pick a vertical. But we did need to make it really good for somebody up front. And when we looked at our options, VCs were well, first of all, you have lots of meetings. A lot of them are relatively formulaic, like you want your notes to be in a specific format, hence the templates. And they were just they're much easier to reach. Like if we emailed them, they would actually respond to us, which is great, because it's kind of their job. If you email like especially like associate VC folks, and you say, hey, I'm working on this AI startup, would you take a look at it or give us feedback? They kind of have to respond to you, which is great from a user testing perspective. VCs, because it's a small market generally, and they're weird. But if you build for VCs and they like your product, it makes fundraising a lot easier. So, there are trade-offs, right? Yeah.
Yeah, which we'll get onto that a little bit more later. But Zoe, I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about Frontline and the sort of difference between the seed and the growth funds, and also maybe how we can get more companies like Granola building here and keep them here.
Got to marry English women. No, I'm joking. Slightly joking. So yeah, let me tell you about Frontline Ventures. So we exist to basically make founders successful on both sides of the Atlantic. So for us, that means focusing very squarely on 2 markets, which represent 70% of global software spend. That's Europe, and that's the US. So we have offices in London, in Dublin, in Palo Alto, and New York. And we have 2 funds. So basically, when you decide to expand across the Atlantic, is a very point-in-time moment for the most ambitious founders who are based in Europe. That tends to be quite early. So kind of go to the US quite early. It's a bigger market. They're much more willing to buy from startups. I won't bore you with all the reasons why that tends to be a good answer. And then interestingly, and something which, again, we can touch on, which is maybe a bit more uncommon, which is our growth fund, US later stage companies who are on the IPO track, who also want to be kind of global leaders, need to think about Europe. So we have done the numbers and done all the data on this. And at the time of listing, it's very, very common that about 30 to 40% of your revenue is coming from Europe. So they cannot ignore Europe, just like we cannot ignore the US. So for us, if you are a globally ambitious founder, those two markets are super important, and we want to be at the forefront of each of those journeys. So the fund I work on, the early stage, seed stage fund, we would hope to find people like you, and then we would get you excited about being in both of those continents early. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'd be forcing you to go and live in the Valley, but it does mean I would be encouraging you to go and experience it and win those US customers early on. Think about that as a target market early on. And then how do we get folks like Granola to build more in Europe? Listen, I think they are. There's people in this room. You are all, like, a decade ago, we might have this panel and be like, can Europe ever have a unicorn? Like, there are hundreds now. The talent is insane. It is widely accepted both amongst my investor community, amongst the US investor community, tier ones across the globe, that people can build insane global category leaders in Europe. And so the conversation's moved on hugely. I think where we probably still have a slight bit of growing up to do is, well, first of all, we are now competing against folks who can raise, on the venture capital side, huge platforms of billions of dollars to deploy into companies. And there aren't that many European growth stage funds who have $15 billion that they just raised last year. Then we just need to move at the same pace. Like these folks, so we see through our growth fund because we co-invest with them. They would come to someone like Chris. They might have already spoken to 50 of his customers, sent him a memo about all the things that they think's interesting about his business, and then send a term sheet a day later. I'm not saying skipping diligence is right, but that speed, that level of conviction is something that I think Europe probably needs to kind of move slightly on. And then finally, we might need to be okay paying up. That is unfortunately some part of the game sometimes, and to not lose to kind of some of those US funds, I think it's important to, but I'd love to hear your perspective. You've probably spoken to all of us on both sides.
I only have my experience. You talk to lots of companies. When we started Granola, we had this choice of, so we actually have a US topco, which means we're incorporated in Delaware, and we have a wholly owned subsidiary in London, and our entire team is here. And we were trying to decide if this was the right thing to do, and everyone in the UK we asked said, don't do it, just incorporate in the UK, and everyone in America we asked said, definitely do it, incorporate in the US. And I didn't have a whole lot of data at the time. I had this sense where I wanted investors and customers to think of us as an American company. I thought that would be advantageous to us, or potentially advantageous. And from a fundraising perspective, I just didn't, not all investors in America will as easily invest in London just because they don't have the mechanics set up. And I didn't want any investor thinking about that potentially down the line when they're going to invest in us. I don't know if this is true, but I believe the valuation, same company valuations tend to be higher in the US than in Europe, which is interesting. Salaries tend to be lower here, so maybe you net out even. But yeah, it also seemed like you listen to me. I have an American accent. My networks, the people I knew, were all in the US, so it felt kind of silly to me personally, for my story, to kind of to close ourselves off to the American venture market. That said, the best American firms all have offices here. They have incredibly talented people here. There's an incredible pre-seed, seed ecosystem that's locally grown here as well. We met a lot of those folks. It just didn't end up turning out that way for us. But yeah, I hear it's a night and day to where things were 15 years ago. So it sounds like it's been a tremendous amount of progress.
And you sort of, at the end, partially answered my next question, which is that all of your main investors are US-based. And we were talking about earlier, and you were saying, it's partly based on your previous experience and you're building with Socratic and your previous investors. But were you sort of conscious when you were raising that it was mostly American investors? And yeah, were you conscious of that?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's a lot of different things go into that decision. My personal view is that you shouldn't think of brand of the firm, you should think about the individual, because you end up working with the individual. And sure, maybe they leave the firm and you have to work with someone else. But this is my second startup. I really wanted to choose, in the same way you'd think about hiring someone, like a very senior person in your company that hopefully you're going to be working with for a very long time. I wanted to choose individuals that I kind of knew and thought would make me or us better, or had complementary views on the world. So our first investor, Mike, so we have 3 main investors. 2 of them I've known in some capacity for 15 years, right? And when we went out to raise the first time, we were basically like, the common belief at the time was that all the money in AI would go to the foundation layer companies, the people who are training their own models, and they would call like the companies building products on top of those models like GPT wrappers. Like they're like, you're just going to be able to copy those, and it's true. It is relatively easy to copy those, but you've seen a lot of like Cursor is worth I don't know how much, or Perplexity is worth how much, and all of these are kind of like the app layer has become very valuable. Anyway, when we went out to raise, we kind of had like we have this vision. We think products can be really important. We think we can build a great product. You kind of have to trust us. And the only people who would trust us were the people who had seen us do it before, if that makes sense. So our first investor, Mike, had seen me kind of build at Socratic, and I think that gave him the conviction to put the money in. And Nabil I've known for a very long time. But that said, there is a certain, at least in the early stages, like in California, there are so many examples of these like crazy ideas that should never have worked that turned into very large companies. And I think having people who worked at those companies just like walking around having like an irrational belief that good things can happen is a helpful thing to have, especially when you're building in such a early and fast-changing space such as AI. And
I mean, you touched on the fact that you've known these investors for a very long time, and it's built on sort of the trust that you were going to be able to deliver. How do you view the sort of founder-investor relationship, and what, maybe not necessarily a specific instance, maybe that's hard to pin down, but what ways have investors brought more to you than just capital by investing in you?
Okay.
Then we can ask Zoe how she's met the founders.
So I think I'm gonna update my advice. So my view on this was, when you're thinking about investors, always think about the bad scenarios, not the good scenarios, right? So, and bad scenarios are basically moments when the way an investor acts can really either mean the end of your company, right? So a great example here is in my last company, Socratic, we ended up selling to Google. Our investors could have blocked that, and they probably should have blocked that from a purely financial outcome, because we had a popular app, we had a term sheet at that point, and I was just burnt out, and my co-founder and I were just like, we want to sell, we think it's the right thing to do for our users, we think it's the right thing to do for our employees, and we don't know if we have it in us. And they could have, probably the smart thing for them to do would have been to block us, and they didn't. And 10 years later, they let our Series A, right? So I guess like my view before was like, always think about the downsides. The reality is I haven't ever run like Granola's growing pretty quickly, and there are just new types of problems that we're hitting that I've never hit before. And I think we're really lucky. Our investors are great. And it's like there's this thread that went viral on Twitter about a security incident for us that actually what turned out not to be a security incident, but how the heck do you like respond to that? And they're like, oh, actually I've done this 15 times before. Like, here's some tips. Let me like jump in a doc and help you out. Like that's invaluable, right? Because nobody on our team had dealt with that kind of situation before. But yeah, we all have, like, WhatsApp's very different. Like now they message me on WhatsApp all the time, which is like I don't know, my previous startup, it was like, we'd go to Boston for a board meeting every like 3 months, and now it's a very different type of communication. Yeah.
Are you constantly WhatsApping your founders?
No. No. I would say that every founder is different. Some want that, and some want you to like just be able to have that kind of I would say like async, spontaneous. I've had a thought ping, and I have them all on WhatsApp, and I do really like to be able to do that, but I'm more reactive on that. I don't want to be the person who is on their cap table taking up their brain space because I've just read something and be like, what do you think about this competitor ping? Like, no one needs that in their life. So I definitely take my lead from how a founder wants to interact, both and some want to be formal, some want to just kind of catch up, like on a board, in person, whatever. But no, I think that has definitely changed availability, openness, trust, etc. Can be a very blurred line. You're knowing people through decades of their lives. That means there's a lot of life that happens within that. So recognizing that on both sides you are human, and that you will go through shit times as well as great times is just so important. I think both of you knowing what your incentives are. So I think it's very important, whether you're a first time, second time, million time founder, to truly understand like what incentivizes that venture capitalist fund to work and that person to work. So like personal motivations and then like very capitalist motivations. It can really be the difference between someone, and I don't think many funds will do this, but blocking your sale or actually being like, you go ahead. And in the same way, us understanding for a founder whether, actually taking 10 million off the table is plenty good enough for me, thank you very much. It can be really hard to get to a point where you can both be as upfront as you need to be about that, and it takes a lot of communication, a lot of trust. But I think where it falls over is expectation mismatch and just total lack of communication. It's why blind referencing the hell out of each other before you go into business can be very, very useful.
And I guess you touched on this because like every founder is different. What every founder wants from their investor is going to be different, and maybe it's different by each investor, maybe as well. But how much, when you were choosing to invest in someone, is that founder personality fit and founder investor fit taken into consideration?
So on my side, hugely. So I have to say we've actually got data to back this up. We survey founders all the time on like, what do you actually want? And other than like truly having a deep understanding of like my business and my market, like having a good relationship, having a good founder investor fit, and not necessarily brand name founder fit is often ranked second highest. For me, two questions I often ask myself before I want to advocate putting kind of capital to work into a business is, would I work for this person? So would I, if Frontline disappeared tomorrow, would I be like, please hire me? And would I do that for free? If I do that, because I'm sure you know how venture capital funds work. Obviously, like my own money goes to work as well. So it's a personal check on like, is that what I would do? And if it is, brilliant, because you are going to go and work for them, essentially. You're going to become another kind of person on their team in whatever capacity they want from you to do that. So.
And Chris, maybe this is a bit of a funny question, given that you've said that all of your investors are people that you've known for a very long time, but your emails are flooded with investors telling you how much they love granola, I assume. How?
It's funny, they're really, they're hard to talk to when you want to talk to them, and then when you don't want to talk to them, they all want to talk to you. So it's like a new experience for me.
How do you, I guess, then distinguish between the people who are sort of truly understanding of your vision and where you want to go with granola and not just hopping on the hype?
Yeah, now I don't know, because now I guess we're kind of out there. In the early days, every company is different, but we're a very product-centric company. Sam and I are very like user-centric, product-centric people. So the messages that would pop for me would be when someone had like clearly like used the product and like reasoned about some subtle decisions we made, and could speak to that in a way that like it's like we felt seen, because we think a lot of the success or the future of the company depends on whether we can actually continue to pull off like great product. And something you can say about all our investors is they're extremely product-minded people. So they're all ex-founders and very product-centric folks. So like when I've gotten those emails where I'm like, they're like, oh, it's like, I freaking love that you did this thing in this weird scenario, but like, you probably got this thing wrong. Like, have you thought about doing it this way? And as long as that's thoughtful, yeah.
And you've mentioned sort of, there's building for a big future of Granola and building for what it can do, and also, dealing with new problems that pop up all the time. How do you balance building for what it's capable of doing right now versus what you want it to do in the future?
Yeah, so I think there may be two ways to interpret the question. One is the models are constantly getting better, right? So they have limitations they have today they won't have in 6 months or 12 months. So how much effort do you spend on trying to get around the limitations that exist today, or just kind of wait for the models to get better? Historically, we've just waited for the models to get better. We basically spent as much of our time as possible on assuming the models will be, try to imagine where you think the models are going to be in 2 years. We would always build for that future, because it takes a while to build stuff and it takes a while to grow users. So we're once the models get good enough to do X, we want Granola to be the best possible product out there. And that served us quite well up until now. I think a different question might be, Granola right now is really all about, it's like Apple Notes with AI and transcription. It's all about generating meeting notes. We see that as a stepping stone to a bigger future, a future where Granola is not about generating notes, but it's actually helping you do a lot of your work. When people ask me what's success for Granola in 12 to 24 months, it'd be if people like Zoe is doing 70% of their work inside of Granola, as opposed to all these other apps. And that's I think also a hard challenge, because we have a product that people use for a very specific use case today, but it's just so incredibly obvious that we're at this inflection point where AI tooling will become 10x better, 10x more useful, I think, in the next 2 years. And a lot of our users are asking for XYZ features kind of on what we have, a little bit faster horses, but we think there's a car to be built, right around the bend. So we have to navigate that as well.
What's the most innovative way you're seeing people use Granola? I want to say weirdest, but maybe that's not a nice word.
So it's for those of you who haven't used it, who here has used Granola, by the way? All right, cool. I don't need to explain it then. It's pretty specific to. It's really designed around use this in meetings, specifically Zoom calls. What I've been surprised by is they don't use this language, but they actually, the way some users use it, they're using it as a context gathering machine. So we have a lot of early stage startups who use us, and a lot of founders will just record all their conversations, even ad hoc weird conversations, and they'll do that so that they can put all those conversations or meetings into a folder and then use that shared context. They could basically use AI to do whatever task or generate whatever document they need to document with the shared context of whatever conversations they're having. I didn't do a good job explaining that, but basically shoving a lot of context into Granola. And that includes things and I didn't expect this, but doctor's visits, if you're meeting with your kid's teacher in a parent-teacher conference, if you're basically whenever you have some information that you might want to recall or it'll have some impact on some future decision of yours, trying to get it into that shared space.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know people who now it's their go-to note-taking. So if they would maybe open Apple Notes and take a note, they will go to Granola and have it, so that, again, they're getting locked in, but they want everything in that one space and they can go back to. So it's interesting to see it change from it's a thing you use in meetings to it's where you document the notes of your whole life, which I'm not sure if that's what you thought would happen or hoped would happen, but.
Yeah, I don't know what I thought would happen. I do think, though, from the beginning, I really do think that how useful AI is really limited by how much it knows you. So the AI that's going to be most useful is the AI that knows you best. And when Sam and I started Granola, we were never oh, we're just going to do meeting notes. We saw that as a stepping stone to building this contextually aware workspace where AI could help you do things. But I think we underestimated just how much information, how much data, how much nuance exists in conversations. We spend a lot of the day talking, and humans communicate verbally extremely quickly. To be able to write the same amount of something as opposed to speaking. It would take much longer. So getting all that context into AI, especially as the models are getting smarter and smarter, it's just like, that's a trend that's going to keep happening, whether it's Granola or not. I think a lot of the next few years are going to be around context curation. Like, how do I get the right context in the right place so that I can work with AI to do the thing I need to do?
And because I'm conscious of time and also want to leave time for some audience questions, I want to wrap just because the title, the theme of is vision and venture, is to ask each of you, so I'm going to say it out loud so I don't butcher my words. Zoe, what's the biggest misconception? I still tripped on it. The biggest misconception that you think founders have about VCs, and what do you wish they knew? And then the inverse for Chris, what do you think is the biggest misconception VCs have about founders, and what do you wish they knew?
I think it's like a comedy meme that we are a bunch of sheep who have a really nice job just sort of floating around country to country, meeting really dynamic, interesting people, building incredible products who we just say no to, unless someone called Sequoia says yes, and then we might say yes. And I think a few things that are really important to note about that is it is a failure-ridden, really long feedback loop job where you never know if you are good at it for a very, very long time. And you do have to say no a lot, which is, as a human, it's a really horrible thing to do, to go and look at someone and say, you're great and what you're building is really interesting, but actually I've only got to say yes. I'm only allowed to really say yes 2 or 3 times this year, so you're going in my no pile. That's just horrible, and you have to do that all the time. It's emotionally quite exhausting because you want everybody to succeed. That maths just doesn't work. And you obviously are very, very personally invested, as well as kind of capitally invested in these folks. So it's not an easy job. It is incredibly rewarding, and I do love it, but I wouldn't say that it is the job that kind of has the jokes around it. And so that's probably my take on the biggest misconception outside in.
The little I've observed is like the number of simultaneous threads that you have to manage is completely, it's like, I had no idea. How do you even do that without it frying your brain? Like,
so I've got this app. Genuinely, that's right. So we're context switching all the time. We are trying to be not as expert as you guys are, but we're trying to meet some of the brightest minds where they are, like day in, day out. We're managing our own stakeholders, which is very similar to you kind of managing us. And all of that whilst trying to deliver like top quality service, which we hope is remembered. It's very rarely remembered. Not that that's, but you've got loads of stuff going on. And of course, operationally, running a fund is like running a business. Like we do have a lot of operational stuff to do. So it's, sorry, this is not like a victim thing, but it's just, woe is me for my terrible job. No, I love our job, but I do think if you were forcing me to say, what do you think is a misconception, it would be like that this is a super easy job. Yeah.
It's all right. I put you in that place, so don't worry.
So what do VCs what misconception they have around founders? I think so like I said, the three folks who kind of come to our board meetings, they were all ex-founders. So I think that helps a lot. I think if you were never an operator, it's just kind of hard to put yourself in those shoes. That said, they were founders a while ago, and I think it does fade. And I think that when we talk to our investors, it's usually very high level. It's kind of like, here's where we are, here are the goals, here's what we want to improve. And I think for them, it's easy to forget that the number of times a day where we're faced with a problem where we literally don't know how we're going to solve it is immense, right? And I think when you're at the framework level, like, oh, okay, we expand to more of this or this other user type. And then when we sit down, we're like, we have no effing clue on how to do this. And we're going to have to like grope around in like the dark for a while and figure that out. And I think that's a lot of startup building. A lot of startup building is like, you don't know what you need to do, and you're just trying some stuff. And there's no playbook that's going to, and usually the things that, what's most valuable, like when a startup like figures something out, those things that are actually really valuable, they're not in the playbooks, because if they're in the playbooks, everybody else would have done it. So it's kind of like the most valuable thing involves a lot of groping around in the dark and not knowing what you're doing. And then I think when you go talk to investors, you put that all in these like frameworks that make it sound like you know what you're doing, but you really don't. It's just a lot of like trying to figure it out. And I don't know. I think there's a bit of it's hard to remember that unless you're doing that all the time.
Yeah, unless that's your day in, day out, you don't think about it as much. Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have a roving mic. That was a hand that went straight up there.
What are your thoughts on hardware?
Hardware, like wearables?
Yes.
Like wearables that listen to us?
Yes.
Yeah. So I might be on the wrong side of history here. I think maybe it's all about timelines. I think that my view is that there's a really big disconnect between the work environment and the non-work environment. And I think in a work environment, they're all like, so if you go to the office, if you go to the Granola office, like we have an iOS app now, most meetings are Granola'd just because we all work there, so obviously we think it's useful, but we all see, it's easy to see the value of that, right? That doesn't mean every Granola meeting shared with everybody, right? It's just for the people in the meeting. So I think the trade-off there is like pretty clear. It's like we're in a work environment, there's certain norms of how we're gonna act and talk about things. We're all working at the same company. And if we have these notes or these transcripts in Granola, it's just gonna make our lives way easier. I think in the social sphere, it's totally different. So there are all these companies in California, primarily, building these wearable pins that will either listen all the time or you wink or tap at them and then they start like listening or recording. To me, that's a lot harder, right? The social contract's different. If you're at a party and this thing's like recording by default, the social norms around that, like how does that? I think it'll take a while, if ever, that becomes the norm. Again, maybe I'm on the wrong side of history here, but I think those two will be pretty different. But we'll see. We'll see what OpenAI is whatever Johnny Ive and Sam Altman are cooking up. So maybe norms will change.
There's someone right at the back who we go to.
I'm curious as to where you see the future of its ability to summarize and add value to the non-verbal strata of communication. So I'm talking about things like being able to add insight to the tone in which people are speaking. When do you think that the app will be able to recognize some of these kind of cues and be able to kind of advise you as to what their inherent meaning may or may not be?
Yeah, so basically what will happen is that the base models will become multimodal, right? So right now what happens is we first take the audio and turn it into a transcript, so we turn it into text, and then we feed the text into the AI. In the future, as the base models become more powerful, we'll actually just feed the audio, and one day potentially the video as well, so that when the model is doing an analysis, it can take things like tone into account, or it can take facial expressions into account. I think that will just happen naturally. Like one of the beautiful things of building out the app layer, which has a lot of drawbacks as well, but is that as the base technology gets better, we just get better along with it. So I don't think we will actually have to do very much. Obviously, we'll change the prompts and we'll have to change the UI, but the summaries and insights, like when you ask a question being like, hey, what that meeting was tense, like what was going on there, what could I have done differently? Like the quality of the output will just be way better when the model is able to like look at the pixels and understand like the tonality of the conversation.
It's definitely not far away, only because on the flip side, I was playing with, I was trying to break a voice AI agent that would like back-end developed and phone you. And it totally was sarcastic, angry, like interrupting. I was goading it to try and see how human the conversation could become. But I was really impressed. So I just don't think that improvement on that side is that far away.
Do we have time for one more?
I remember talking to Sam when it was only 4 or 5 of you guys, and now I think you're about 20. We spoke a lot about what you're looking for in VCs. How are you thinking about growing the team? What are you looking for? The rock stars, my favorite in particular, Jonathan, with the iOS app. How are you thinking about growing the team?
Okay, so from House in Mallorca to growing the team. Yeah, we don't tweet about this or talk about it on social media, but basically what keep it in the room. Basically what we did. So okay, so here's a. If I zoom all the way out, I think that small groups of people who are like have a shared vision for the future and are really excited about it and really committed to it can build really incredible things. And I think that's always been the case, and I think that's especially the case today with AI and whatnot. Sam worked at a previous startup which built this like skiing app, like this iOS app that would improve your skiing form or technique using the accelerometers. And to be able to test their app, they needed to ski all the time. So they rented this like little chalet, which, you know, they had a good reason.
Struggle.
Yeah. And basically it was like, that thing is what connected, like, everybody would go to it. They'd bring their friends. It kind of like brought the whole company together. It like created this like culture where it didn't feel like you're just going to work and I'm going home, but you're part of like not a family, but like somewhere between like a group of friends or whatnot. And we said, wow, that sounds amazing. We should do that. I don't really like skiing that much, but I love the sun. And we realized for not that much money compared to what an office costs in London, you can rent a small house in Mallorca for the year. We go out there and work on stuff. And anyone who works at Granola can use it whenever we're not using it for work and bring their family and friends there. Like, I guess we're very lucky to be able to offer that as a perk. And we've never tweeted about it, but it comes up a surprising amount when I meet random people. They're like, so this house, like, when can I go and how does it work? But yeah, in terms of who we're trying to hire, I guess we haven't gone through this whole process of formalizing, you know, in like a very structured way our specific criteria. But there are basically three things that like come up a lot. Like we want to hire people who are kind, so the kind of person who would put the team above themselves, who would, if you're going through something tough, like, you know, who will support you and you know that. We want to hire people who are ambitious, and that means that they're self-motivated. They're the kind of folks that you'd never be like, hey, can you can you work harder on this thing? It's more like, hey, you should. I know you care a lot about it, but why don't you? It's fine. just relax. Like they're doing it for themselves, not for external. And the last one is, I really do think this is a special moment with this brand new tech. It's like, I think AI or modern LLMs, it's a little bit like we've just discovered fire as humans, right? And it's like, what are we going to do with this thing? And like some people just feel that way and are just so excited to build on top of it, and others don't. And that's like another thing that's like super important to us. So.
I think that's a lovely note to end on, and I'm not sure we're going to get more of a deep cut than tell us about your house in Mallorca. So thank you.
We're hiring across the board, and the house is a benefit. So if you know anyone who would like to come work on a cool AI product from London and sometimes go to Mallorca, please put them in touch with me.
You might be mobbed after this panel. Cool. Well, thank you so much for the questions. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and a huge round of applause for Zoe and Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.